Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us. And my name is Valentina, and I am representing the organizational team of the EELNE, which is the Educational Leadership Network Europe. And we are the coordinators of this event. And just to tell you a little bit about the EELNE, if you don't know what it is, we are a network, and the reason to do a webinar such as this one is because we want to engage all types of stakeholders in a conversation, and we want to also give them a voice in order to share their interesting practices, research methods, etc., so that all the educational community can benefit. So this is what we're doing right now. We're giving here our coordinators the opportunity to share their practices. And now I'm just going to give the word to Maya, who's going to present this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentina, and thank you, the entire European Educational Leadership Week team, for gathering us all here. I would like to welcome all of you who are attending. I would like to ask you all in the chat, if that's okay, to just list where you're from in terms of the country that you're currently residing, as well as your professional role. I would like to know if you are a teacher, if you are working for an NGO, if you are perhaps with the Ministry of Education. And the reason why I'm asking this is because it will help me customize some of the content that we will be speaking about later on. So thank you in advance for offering this information in the chat as we proceed. I see that some people are saying that they're sending greetings from Croatia and Belgrade and Belgium, but again, I would like to kindly ask you to put the country that you're currently based in, as well as your professional affiliation. Thank you in advance. We have a school leader from Czech Republic. We have somebody from an NGO also from Belgium. We have somebody who might know me from a organization that I was affiliated with from the Netherlands. They do excellent work in teaching about disinformation and how to counter hate speech online. So thank you, RNW Media team. Okay, we have somebody working in the Netherlands as well, somebody in Poland, Belgium. We have somebody from Croatia who is a teacher of history. So dobrodošli, welcome as well. Okay, so I'm very happy that you're sharing. It's very good to see some of the diversity in the room. And just so that you know that we were asked to prepare an interactive session, but the interactivity level is going to depend primarily, obviously, on you. As you can imagine, it's a little bit difficult to interact on Teams where I cannot see all of your faces at the same time, and with many of you having your cameras off, but we will do our best. Now, why polarization and why depolarization? Why do we think that this topic is even relevant? I would like to see a show of hands, if you can use your little virtual hands. How many of you have experienced polarization in your current workplace or in the schools that you are active in? Feel free to use the reaction emoji in your current options. Okay, so I'm seeing some people react. Yes. So I'm wondering, Magdalena, if you would be kind enough to maybe share your story. What kind of polarization did you experience in your professional setting?
Hello. Yeah, we had some polarization between teachers, and it was some years ago, but this was this type. Yeah.
So it was a polarization between equals, meaning in the staff collective.
Yes.
Okay, and was the topic addressing politics or something else?
It was about leadership at school. Yeah, who should lead the school if teachers are leader?
Okay, yeah, that's kind of quite concrete. I completely understand that level of potential conflict. Anybody else, can I ask you to share an example of a type of a polarizing topic or a polarizing discussion that you've experienced in your educational context?
Yes, gladly. Hello. There are so many topics we can really experience at the moment polarization. I will put aside the politics and will concentrate on the didactics, and the changing role of the teacher is really a hot topic. And rising high emotions on any sides, whether we should be stick to the master pose or we should be facilitators of educational experiences, whether the online world is better and more efficient than an offline, or yeah, that would be going on. But basically, the changing role of the teacher is a heated discussion, and it's good because the energy is floating.
I like it that you're trying to come up with a positive spin on the fact that we are very passionate nowadays about many different things. Now, we're also having somebody share in the chat that some of the topics that they find quite polarizing are the climate crisis, student rights, mental health, of course, and then teaching versus educating, digitalization of education, and other topics. Now, why am I asking you to provide examples? Because I took a gamble and knew that we wouldn't be struggling to identify topics. Unfortunately, I find that polarization is something that is not a new phenomenon. It is something that has been with us for a long time. Basically, since the moment that we humans started communicating, I think that we were disagreeing about things. However, nowadays, we have the added problem of a lot of communication and a lot of media or news consumption flowing through social media. And social media is a very particular form of context in which the algorithms have a tendency to create filter bubbles, echo chambers, and make sure that we are isolated from one another and that we only inhabit a space where we agree with certain people who share our views. But then there are those other people whose views we do not share. And this is in essence the core of polarization and the topic that we would like to talk to you about here. Now, my name is Maja Nenadovic, and the strange thing about me is that for a long, long time, I used to be a debate coach. So a professional, academic, non-formal debate coach. What does that mean? That means that for the longest of time, I used to coach high school students as well as university students in how to beat each other with arguments. We were talking about argumentation, we taught rhetoric, we taught persuasion, we taught public speaking. And don't get me wrong, debate is excellent. If you want to sharpen your critical thinking skills, if you want to boost your students' confidence and build their analytical skills as well. At the same time, the problem is, and this is something that I've come to find later on in life, is that we have a tendency to debate without the context of a formal debate. When I'm coaching debate with students, the beauty there is that there are two things. There are rules, and there is an adjudicator, a supposedly impartial person who will, at the end of the students' debate, decide who was more convincing, who had stronger arguments. The problem is that we have a tendency to engage in debate with individuals in our lives, and there is no rules then, and there is no adjudicator or an impartial person who would help us weigh and come to a conclusion. So the discord, the disagreement ends up escalating. This phenomenon is what encouraged us from the Croatian Education and Development Network for the Evolution of Communication, our shorthand is HERMES, to come up with a project called Depolarisation Activism for Resilient Europe. We wanted to encourage educators to address controversy and to address polarizing topics in the classroom. And the final why I will answer is slightly also feeding into the debate on what are educators nowadays supposed to do. because we know that we expect a lot from educators. We expect them to educate, we do expect them to inform young people, but we also expect them to effectively help young people not fall prey to multiple manipulation potentials that exist out there, be it manipulation through false information that is circulating online, or through in general conspiracy theories or other type of information disorders. And this is the reason why we're here. Now, I would like to present my colleague from HERMES, Tvrtko Pater, who will also tell us a little bit about the DARE project.
So greetings, everyone. Thank you very much for being here, for sharing your time with us. So obviously, as we've already seen, you're very familiar with polarization. Unfortunately, nowadays, all of us are, right? And while I think most of us are comfortable with the concept of disagreement, we're comfortable with the concept of different perspectives, we are even enthusiastic about diversity, perhaps, right? What we see more and more that it's not about different opinions. It's not about having a constructive discussion. It's more and more about picking a side and sticking to that side, hell or high water. And those of you who come from the Balkans have had, probably most of you, also the misfortune of seeing where that potentially leads. Because at the end of the day, communication is the lifeblood of society. Our ability to talk, to discuss, to find solutions defines whether or not our relationships and our societies thrive or crumble. If we are unable to communicate, if every single problem that comes our way is a reason to fight rather than to come together, if every challenge is a reason to see the person who thinks differently as the other, that isn't a good recipe. Because the more and more you give up on the other, the more and more you believe that you are right and the other side is absolutely wrong. They're stupid, they're ignorant, they're hateful, they're uneducated, they're bigoted. They don't understand our values. The more you go down that street, the less and less it becomes relevant to talk to them. Because what's the point of talking to somebody who's simply evil, who's out to destroy our way of life, who's out to ruin the future of our children? And the more and more we give up on talking to the other side, the more there's a vacuum, the more there's a terrible silence. And in our case, that silence was ultimately filled with the sound of gunfire and explosions. Now, again, this is not something that's unfamiliar to you. All you need to do is to turn on the TV to see what's happening and to get depressed about it. The real question here is, what can we do, right? What can we do as people who believe in democracy, people who believe in exchange of ideas, people who believe in collaboration and coming together? How can we fight this extreme form of division, this polarization? Because we want to have people who think differently, but we want them to come together rather than be torn apart because of their differences. Now, first and foremost, let me immediately say, the DARE project isn't a panacea to all of these problems, obviously. These are very old problems. Polarization, division, hateful narratives are as old as time. They might have gotten more severe due to social media, due to echo chambers, because it's much easier to find an extreme voice that you agree with, much easier to shut out rational voices that take the middle road. But at the end of the day, it is a problem that has existed since time immemorial. So what can we even do about it to address it? Where our attempt, I would say our humble attempt at dealing with this is the DARE project. Because at the end of the day, our philosophy is that everybody is good at the stuff that they are familiar with and that they practice. And that applies to mostly anything in life. If you want to be a great athlete, you have to exercise regularly. If you want to be a fantastic pianist, you have to play the piano a lot. If you want to be good at football, good at brain surgery, good at writing, good at pretty much anything, You have to practice, because that's the only way you learn. That's the only way you get better at it. And oftentimes, some of the core things that are required for relationships, for society, are the things we don't practice, are the things we take for granted. How we communicate, our ability to communicate, how do we express our thoughts, but also how do we deal with conflict? How do we deal with polarization? How do we find common ground? How do we talk about the most difficult, most divisive topics? The idea behind the DARE project is that everything in life that's important, everything in life that you want to be good at, you need to practice. And our hope is that our materials, our lesson plans, our videos, our manual provides an avenue for educators to practice these crucial skills with their students. It won't solve the problem overnight. It isn't a miracle cure, but in my humble opinion, the more we practice these skills, the more we promote them, the more we make students comfortable with engaging with other ideas, rather than the default setting of Twitter, where I find somebody who I disagree with and then I insult them. The more we provide an alternative, the more we practice the alternative, hopefully the better the results will be when it comes down to it. And the core document here in the project, at least in my mind, is of course the guide to depolarization. So without further ado, Maya, I hand the floor to you.
Thank you, Tvrtko or Noah. So for all of you educators out there, I'm going to put now in the chat the guide that we currently have. And the guide that I'm sharing is the English version. But on the website, we also have the versions of the guide in German, in Swedish, as well as in Bosnian and Croatian and Serbian languages. So in that sense, we do have it in a couple of languages, and it is currently being translated to a couple of more European languages on the basis of simply different organizations contacting us and saying that they would like to use it and promote it. The guide itself has some 8 or 9 exercises that any teacher can do. And every single one of the exercises is either 45 minutes or 90 minutes long. So one of the reasons why we were kind of designing the activities in such a way was to make sure that especially the teachers who are head teachers, meaning if you have a class that you're guiding kind of throughout their 3 or 4 years of education, sometimes these head teachers, they have an extra class during week to spend with their students, and they told us that they find it interesting to do different activities that are related to contemporary topics. Now, one big disclaimer I would like to say is that in many of our countries currently in Europe, the educational system or the general political system is not very conducive for you to address polarizing topics in the school. Why is this the case? Because effectively, this could, for some teachers, constitute an act of civic courage. I don't know if any of you here are from, well, from Bosnia and Herzegovina. There are some cases where this might not be welcome. I think that from some educators in Hungary as well, some of these topics might be too sensitive to address. So just because we are giving you some of these tools here and suggesting that you can use them, I would still like to make sure that there is a disclaimer on our end saying that every single educator knows best their context of work. And here comes the tricky part. I think that whether we like it or not, real world spills over into the classroom. So yes, all of you teaching, you have your curriculum that you need to go through. You have the competences and the topics that the students are going to be tested on at some point, and you don't really have the time to add extra work to your plate. But unfortunately, we find that sometimes certain events and certain topics will find a way to spill over into the classroom and become incredibly disrupting to the actual process of education. And it is precisely because of this disruption that we believe that you need to find a way to handle the disruption once it happens, because if you simply glaze over it or pretend it's not there, it will find a way to hijack the educational process nonetheless. So I would like to now ask if that's okay in the chat, or if anybody wants to turn on their camera and microphone to share live. What do you currently do as an educator if such a topic is raised in the classroom? How did you deal with students maybe debating the question of vaccines during the pandemic? Is anyone currently experiencing student discussions or conflict when it comes to the war in Ukraine, or currently the war in Israel and Palestine? I would like to see if anybody wants to share a little bit what is your go-to reaction or your go-to strategy for addressing such topics. Pete, I believe you are raising your hand. And I hope that I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I apologize if I'm not, please correct me.
No worries. The long version is Panayotis, so with Pete, you're quite fine. Hello,
Okay,
I'm
Panayotis is great.
I'm Panayotis. I'm working for OBESU, the Organizing Bureau of European School Student Unions. I'm not a teacher myself, but working with students and being an educator. Many times, at the times of COVID, it was matters about vaccination. Even today, I hear people all the time talking about COVID boosters and how they don't work, but they actually pass over COVID to you, and that's why the cases are increasing. Which many times, like when we work with students, and we still need to be sure when it comes to health and when it comes to interactions, not only because of COVID, but you have the flu, and also, like, you know, there are people with health vulnerabilities, so you need to make sure that everybody's needs are covered. There's always the principle of understanding where my rights begin and when the other person's rights begin as well, not ending, because we also need to understand the language we use. Many times I hear like where your rights start and when the limits are, those your line ends. Your rights shouldn't end. They should be coming and bonding together in a way that both parties feel comfortable, or they can coexist. I think the other part is the principle of tolerance, which we don't have really prioritized for the last few years in a matter of really educating about tolerance and the importance of it in our educational system, mainly in the formal settings, because we talk about empathy, we talk about understanding, but to reach to such sentiments or to be able to understand differences between people, you need to tolerate. It is an unfortunate path towards acceptance and towards understanding, but you need to be comfortable in sharing a space. For example, in polarization, what was mentioned before, like for the example of Twitter, is that I don't have to first tolerate you. I don't have to coexist with you. I can be on different sides. And we saw that very much so when it comes to politics, when it comes to the US elections, for example. And we are moving towards there, and I'll start wrapping up, is that we're moving towards there, that polarization outside school becomes and shapes our education, because our political decisions and polarized ideas shape not only the class inside, but what the curricula is covering. How is it covered? How is it important to have parents engaged, but on the other side, not only engaged, but have power to shape what a student or their children can learn or not, forgetting that themselves as learners have rights as well to shape their own education. Which all these different discussions and polarization not only shapes how education is done, but what type of education we have. And that is the most scary part nowadays, because before, since the beginning of times, as you mentioned, Maya, we were polarized. That was the part of democracy. We have different opinions, different views, and we engage in a dialogue, much more so than before. Before it was mainly conflict, but at the end of the day, we're going back to the circle of history. We're repeating the same mistakes, and conflict becomes more of a choice today versus an opportunity for dialogue. Thank you.
And I'm so happy, Panayotis or Pete, that you mentioned this, because this is exactly what we perceive conflict as, an opportunity. unfortunately, I think nowadays we perceive conflict as something to run away from, something to put under the carpet, something to kind of slightly glaze over or pretend somehow it's not there, but we perceive conflict also as something inevitable. And conflict can be as small as you wanting to go to this restaurant and me wanting to go to some other restaurant, and then we as friends get into a spat about it. But conflict is actually simply difference. It's a difference of perspective. It's a difference of views. And we believe that it's A, nothing to be scared of, and B, it actually only becomes a problem if we let it fester and grow. So in that sense, for us, the whole goal is to encourage dialogue. And we believe that, as my colleague Tvrtko has said, communication is something that is crucial to us as humans, but we find it quite problematic that we don't really learn how to communicate with one another. I'm not so familiar with any school in Europe teaching dialogue or teaching non-violent communication skills. Sometimes you have these projects a little bit like non-formal outside of the school system, but we feel that short of debate as a competitive academic activity, which is sometimes in schools, we do not really learn how to communicate and how to communicate across differences. So I would like to ask Željka to share a little bit, because she wrote that her students and her, they talk a lot about different topics, for example, the wars in Ukraine or in Palestine, and they have an open talk with tolerance and empathy. So Željka, I just wanted to ask if that's okay. Was this the starting point always with tolerance and empathy, or did you guide your students a little bit towards reaching this particular way of talking to each other? If you can share.
Yes, I have to lead my students about this talk about tolerance and empathy. They didn't have a real opinion about that. They know what the media said to them and what their parents said to them. So I have to be a lead in this talk if they have to open talk about these topics.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So basically, if I'm hearing it correctly also, is that because you are not afraid of creating the space and inviting students' opinions, there's also an element of trust from students to engage in sharing their opinions in your classroom. And I think that this is very, very important. Thank you so much for sharing, Željka. I believe that Monica also wants to share something. I apologize if I don't see somebody. It's the interface.
Hi, yes, no worry. Hi,
Yes,
Maya,
perfect.
thank you. My name is Monica. I'm from European Federation of Education Employers, and just a few thoughts crossed my mind when I was reading first the chat and I was listening to both of your interventions. First, replying to Željka, yes, I'm sorry. You said that you are able to talk with your students with tolerance and empathy about those conflicts, political conflicts. I'm a sister to a younger woman who is my sister. She's going to high school and in Warsaw, and I can tell you she's not able to talk about this because in her school those topics are not touched upon. Teachers are not opening up the space to exchange and to educate pupils, right? I think it was Maya what you said, that not in every country there's opportunity like that. So unfortunately my sister is one of these countries, and it's Poland, so it's next to Ukraine, right? Which would have seemed natural to talk about it because we are supporting Ukraine all the time. Second thing that you said, Maya, I think that was a bit before, that you are or were, right, debate coach in classroom. I'm sorry if I'm confusing, but what I think about when I was in school, and then when I think about my sister, nothing changed much, because I think one side is about, right, teaching students about constructive dialogue or exchanging of arguments. But there's also an important aspect of school heads and teachers themselves. Are they open enough to create this room for a dialogue? Because I remember many of my classmates were petrified to speak up, to raise their hands, and my sister, she's still in the same problem. she tells me, you know, like, yeah, there are usually 3-4 people speaking up, but the rest is just, you know, nodding their head because it's safer, because some teachers are just not allowing, in quotation mark, for any other opinion than theirs, right? So I think it's going bilaterally. Of course, we need to educate young people how to talk about it, but on the other side, I think it's also crucial to educate school heads, because I think it's something what Pete mentioned. We need to meet somewhere in the middle, right? We need to go compromise. So that's just a few thoughts, and the last thing is also what you mentioned about, you know, disagreeing and polarization. I love when I'm being challenged, especially by my colleagues, because I spend most of my time with them. And I have to smile and give a nod to Valentina and Axel here. You know, I love being challenged, and I think that's something that that makes us human beings better, because, you know, we are broadening our horizons. So I think it's really there are many things to be improved, both internally and externally. But I'm really glad to have listened to both of you and to other participants here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Monica. And you kind of touched upon one of the core reasons why polarization is problematic, because most of us, for some reason, this is a human predicament, we have a tendency to identify ourselves with our thoughts. So what does that mean? That means that when you disagree with me, you reject me. I feel personally attacked. And I like it that you mentioned that you critically self-reflected on yourself, and that you said that you grow through disagreement, that you're happy to be challenged. And this is precisely what we believe a healthy conflict and constructive dialogue classroom could build in students. This element of normalization of disagreement, and this element of also opinions and views being able to shift, being able to transform and change and grow. So I think that this is, again, like that muscle that Tvrtko was talking about earlier on. It takes practice, and it takes just simply more exposure to this type of engagement. Now, if that's okay with you, I would like to share just very briefly one activity from the guide, just to give you a bit of a sneak preview, a little bit how it looks like. And if that's okay, I'm going to ask all of you to take part with me, even though I'm going to only be able to ask 1 or 2 people to share their exercise. So I hope you all have a piece of paper and a pen just for yourselves. And what I'm going to ask you, I'm going to assign you a word, just a word or a concept. And please write that word on the front page. So for example, here you don't see it because of course everything is dimmed, but here I wrote democracy, right? Just, you know, one big word on one page. And if that's okay, I'm just gonna assign different words to different people. So here comes the assignment. So like I said, on the front page, you have one word, I have democracy. On the back of the page, please write plus, minus, and circle, which means that the word that you have, I'm going to ask you to define it in 3 different ways. So since I have the word democracy, let's try with the positive definition of democracy. I'm going to go with the political system that maximizes the chance that minority rights will be respected. Let's try with the negative definition. Democracy is a system that allows elites to capture power and only present their own self-interest. And the third is the neutral definition, and I'm going to say democracy is just one of potential systems of government. So I hope that you can hear the distinction between a positive definition, the negative definition, and the neutral one. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to come up with a definition of your own words that I've given, and then I'm going to ask 2 or 3 volunteers to share their definitions.
So the plan was to share some inspiring classical music with you now, but unfortunately I'm too incompetent to do so. So imagine a light orchestral string in the background helping you write out those definitions. It's powerful, so it stimulates you, but it's also soothing, so it makes the exercise more enjoyable.
So I'm going to ask a couple of volunteers, 2 or 3 people, to tell us their definitions of their chosen or assigned words. And the important part here is that you don't tell us if you're reading the positive, the negative, or the neutral definition, we're asking you to shuffle them in the order. And then once you give us a definition, the rest of us are going to vote to see how it sounds. Does it sound positive to us? Does it sound negative? Does it sound neutral? So since we don't really have the best way of voting here, and because many of the cameras are off, what I'm suggesting is that we do reaction buttons. So if something sounds positive to you, do the thumbs up reaction, kind of like I'm doing right now. If something sounds negative to you, do the ha-ha face, okay? I think that makes sense in terms of the negative options. And if something sounds neutral, do the surprised little face, okay? So this is a little bit how we're going to be voting. I apologize, it's going to be really weird, but I think we can all manage. The idea is that this exercise works better when we're on Zoom and we can all see each other, but we can try simply to run it here. So let's see if we have any volunteers who would like to do their word. Eva, yes, perfect. So Eva, please, you can go first. Can you remind us what was your word?
Yes, my word was election.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
So
your word was election. So remember, don't tell us which type of definition you're reading and shuffle them around. Eva, your first definition of elections. Let's go.
time or process when people vote to choose.
Oh, nice. Let us vote. Okay, I see the majority voting neutral. Very good. Let's go with the second definition.
A chance to have your voice to be heard.
Okay, this is a chance to have your voice to be heard. Let's see. For most people, this is positive. For me, it's negative. I'm very particular about whose voices I want to be heard, but I'm sorry about that. Okay, we're going to have Eva now.
I can empathize with that.
Sure. And let's see the third. Let's see the third.
Okay, the third is not a mystery, but it's an experience to be confronted with the power of majority.
Oh, interesting. The experience to be confronted with the power of majority. Okay, definitely. I can see, which is really funny. We all kind of are like democratic, but we're not really liking the experience of being confronted by majority. Thank you so much, Eva.
Thank you.
You aced the exercise. Perfect. Let's see who else wants to go.
Well, actually, you did.
No, it was very, very good. Okay, can we have somebody else? So thank you, Bolas, for being brave. What was your word, Bolas?
Hi, everybody. Bolas from currently the Netherlands and otherwise Hungary. So my first definition for education is
education.
Yeah, indoctrination through systemic propaganda.
Nice, I love it. Okay, so I did the wrong reaction, but everybody's really laughing. I love it. Okay, so I think the majority is choosing negative. Very good. What's your second definition?
Second definition is imparting important skills and knowledge.
Okay. So for some people, this is positive. For some, it's neutral. Very good. And the third definition?
And the third one is empowerment through knowledge, skills, and attitudes.
Empowerment. Okay, nice. Very good. So for some people, this is neutral. For some people, this is positive. Very good. Thank you so much, Bolas. Okay, perfect. Can we have somebody, can I have somebody who was defining marriage? I love those.
That was me, and you chose the worst person ever to do marriage.
Okay, I'm very sorry. Okay,
no,
Pete.
Okay.
Give us one of the definitions.
Okay. A legal or religious ceremony that reaffirms the commitment of two people in formalizing the companionship. I went really formal here, huh?
Okay, yeah. I'm getting a neutral feel from the majority of people. Okay, very good. Second?
So the second version is a union of two different people as a way to demonstrate their love, feelings between them and the people close to them, but also the law or religious figure they believe in.
Okay, interesting. We have
and then
positive for most people.
And then a practice that besides love, it builds on inequality and discrimination against women in various ways.
Okay, very good, very good.
Pretty kind. There was more, but
Yeah. Okay, so I have to apologize. Honestly, I'm not sure if the team, I think that they're recording this. Look, this is the team's mistake that when somebody says something negative, we're bursting into laughter. It makes us seem very insensitive, but it's really the limitation of the reaction emojis. So I apologize for that.
It's better
Okay,
to laugh than cry.
That is true. So we could go through this entire list, but I just wanted to give you a sneak preview of this exercise, which I like to call the power of definition. Effectively, when you have a class full with students, I would ask you to custom tailor those words to some of the current polarizing topics that you have, and then disperse them with some general topics like man, woman, Warsaw, Amsterdam, doesn't matter where you are. You can have them define the country that they're from, like France or Italy. And then with some of these more potentially sensitive topics. Then give them the same assignment to do the words in positive, negative, and neutral. And then at the end, as you as the teacher are facilitating this discussion, one of the first things that's going to become very obvious, but then you point it out to students at the end as you're reflecting, is that first thing, we understand different things differently. Something that is positive to me is maybe negative to you and neutral to somebody else. And I think it's very interesting because the students in class, they're voting with thumb up, thumb down, or with like a circle for neutral. So I like it for people to simply see that we have different ways of understanding things. And I think it's important to drive this point home. The second thing that I want the students to walk away from this exercise is that words have an emotional echo. And when you do this exercise and when there's more people giving you their definitions, one of the first things you realize is that we all have this flat line when you get the neutral definition. The neutral definition is almost the one that everybody agrees on, because why? It usually leaves us kind of cold a little bit. With the positive and the negative, it's different, because this is where sometimes people get into disagreements. So I want the students also to be aware of the fact that words have an emotional charge. The third thing I want people to walk away with from this little activity is this element of the fact that most of the times we end up talking about a topic, but we never really checked if we have the exact same understanding of what it is that we're talking about. And here comes the tricky part, because in debating, and Balázs is one of my former debate colleagues, so he would know that one of the first things we do in debate is we define the topic, right? But this is what we don't do. Like if you and I are going to start discussing European Union, we're not going to have to like really quite define what EU is. However, I think this is a missed opportunity, because sometimes we end up getting into a conflict or disagreement without even understanding that our starting understanding or starting definition of the topic was completely different. And I mean, going back to Pete's concept of marriage, some people are very pro-marriage. For some people, marriage is an institutionalized, legalized something, and they don't necessarily have any kind of emotional attachment to the concept. So then if two people start talking about marriage, you can see how they're going to have very different opinions simply because their starting point or the definition was very different. So I want you to encourage your students to simply think about how they define things, and to also be aware of the element that they can always redefine things. We have the power to define things, and we have the power to redefine them. We just don't use that power that often. And the final thing that is part of this exercise, which is useful for depolarization, is when you get to talk to somebody and you realize that there is a sensitive topic, a sensitive concept that you're discussing, my advice is always go to neutral. Bring it down to neutral. Because if you go to positive, if you go to negative, there is a chance of simply amplifying whatever disagreement or discord you might have. If you bring it down to neutral, that creates a more level playing field, a more level foundation on which you can build your actual dialogue on the topic. So this was just a very small sneak preview of one of the activities that are present in the guide. And I definitely advise it to you if you want to use it. Sometimes it's also a good icebreaker if we're talking about different topics at different events. So in that sense, I definitely warmly invite you to have fun with it. I promise that people will come up with different definitions that will be quite funny. So I think that it's useful to also use it as a humorous intermezzo. Now, I'm going to leave it to Tvrtko to present some of the additional educational materials that we created in the DARE project. I would like Tvrtko to just, if you can please, really focus on maybe the modern challenges, because I think that from the topics that we've heard from participants, these are some of the topics that are quite important to address. And I think that for high school students, they might be the most relevant. So back to you.
Gladly. Thank you very much. So the guide is the starting point, right? The guide is kind of a toolbox and an introduction to different things you can do in the classroom with students to practice those skills, to strengthen that muscle. Now, it's not the only set of things you can do, and I'm sure that many of you already have strategies, approaches, exercises, lessons that you already use. And that's the takeaway kind of I want to start with, that while we did try to include as many perspectives as possible in the project, there's Sweden, there's Croatia, Germany, Bosnia, Serbia, we can't encompass everything. And we can't know the specifics of your situation. So while we have gone out of our way to make sure that the materials are easy to use, clear, and are a step-by-step guide on what you should do in the workshop or in the class, we don't expect you to use them as is, because you know your context better, you know your audience better, you know your topics and your needs better than we do. Our hope is that at the end of the day, you might not use most of the materials, you might not use any of the materials as they are on the website, but that some of these methods will be an inspiration for you to integrate them into the work you already do, maybe to inspire you to kind of switch it up, because at the end of the day, everything here is modular. As Maya already stated, when it comes to the power of definition, you decide what terms will be used. Maybe the ones suggested in this guide are not as relevant to you as they are to us. You simply remove those terms, you insert the things that you consider more topical. With that being said, let me just very quickly run you through what can also be found on the website, what other materials are there to be used. Now, European values. We all know them, we all love them, but how often do we bring them up in class? How compatible are they with the classroom workshop setting? I would say not very. Well, what we did is we created a set of cards that have a picture on one side, text on the other. They're tangible, they're topical, they cover a lot of different things, and they're there to foster discussion in the classroom, because that's what we are hoping to do. One of the core messages of all of these materials is we can talk about these difficult topics, we can have different opinions, but despite it being a bit heated, despite us not agreeing at the beginning of the workshop or at the end of the workshop, we didn't become enemies. We're still friends. We exchanged our perspectives. There is nothing wrong with thinking differently. There's nothing wrong with conflict. The only thing that's the problem is if we're not ready to listen, if we're not ready to share, if we always go fight or flight, right? So, and in the European values cards, you will find that it isn't this Europe is perfect, there are no problems in Europe approach, but rather it covers the good, the bad, and the ugly, because the only way to improve society is to talk about the things that ail us. Now, to make this idea of civic engagement, of being a citizen in society more tangible to young people, right? How can they contribute? We decided to highlight a number of young people doing important volunteer work in different places in Europe. It can be a young woman working in an animal shelter. It can be somebody else working as an anti-cyberbullying activist and helping those who face troubles in this area. It can be a young person who is LGBTQ and has a lot of problems in his community and the place where he lives, but rather than waiting for somebody else to solve the problem, he himself is helping people with their issues. And there's a bunch of other examples here, ranging from multi-religious communities in their communication, to facing history and being a young educator, to doing debate, to peace building and different kinds of activities. These are 10 videos that highlight the fact that civic engagement, being active in a democratic society, isn't something that people in history books do, isn't something that is only for adults, but rather is a beautiful blessing and an opportunity for young people in many places in the world, but an opportunity that we need to use in order for it to come to fruition. And rather than going for civic engagement, what are we even talking about? Here we're highlighting very tangible examples of young people making a difference. And finally, 10 videos on hot button issues. Think Kurzgesagt, think cool online explainer videos, only much less cool and low budget. But you know what's the thing with low budget material is that it's completely free on our website. Because I know some of you are thinking, oh, but these materials, they must be very expensive. How can I get to this amazing polarization video? All you need to do is go to YouTube. You need to engage with the topic of this information, but you need something to start that discussion, to cover some of the basics. Here's the video. Not sure how to proceed after the video is played? Here's the lesson plan, and that's what you'll find on the website. Every single piece of content and media has a downloadable lesson plan that runs you step by step through how to lead a class, a workshop. And as previously mentioned, you will then change, adapt, improve that system, that blueprint to serve your needs better. We were very privileged to work with Transform from Sweden, who deal with extremism and radicalization, and the question of how young people get drawn into this, how can they be saved from these extremist groups. There's lesson plans, there's videos, and also just a bunch of hot button issues that kind of get discussed, but usually not in the classroom. Immigration, mental health, individual pollution, the question of civic engagement, where are you from, and the topic of nationalism. We don't think that we've invented something that's completely new. We don't think you're not engaging with these topics already. We know that the very fact that you're here proves that you care and are already doing something. Our hope is that these materials will be something that you find useful, that these completely free, accessible anytime from anywhere online materials, which can be found on the website that I just shared in the chat, are here to help you in the good work you're already doing. So once again, from my side, I know the ambition is lofty. I know that the world is imperfect in many ways, but in my mind, who are the people who can make a small impact that over time will grow into something more tangible, something that will improve the lives of students in generations to come? I think it's you. And if along that road, our materials can be of any use to you, that would be a humbling and wonderful experience for us. Also completely free on the website.
Okay, so we're very respectful and mindful of your time, and we definitely want to congratulate you all for bearing with us through this sprint, because we do believe we downloaded a lot of information into you in quite a short period of time. Now, due to GDPR rules, we do not have access to your email addresses or to any other information about you, but if any of you are currently working in a school and would benefit from receiving the educational material, which is either the guide to depolarization or the European values cards, we would be happy to send you a printed copy. So in that sense, if anybody is interested in this material, please be so kind to reach out to the organizers, to Valentina or Axel, and then they will convey to us your information, if that's okay. Yeah, I think this is the best GDPR way of doing things. So I feel like I'm speaking a weird language whenever I refer to the general data protection law. That said, we wish you a good evening, everybody, and thank you once again for being with us. I'm going to give it back to Valentina.
Thank you
she's
very
here.
much. If I could ask you to just react one more time, just to give a round of applause to our presenters, because that was really so instructional and so inspiring. Thank you so much for this webinar. I think we all really enjoyed it. And just one final word, and I will let you go, I promise. Be sure to join us tomorrow for the webinars. We're starting with Education Chatter, which is very interesting because we're speaking to this teacher who uses skateboarding to teach, so very cool. And then we're also having our research corners and many more webinars, so please make sure to sign up in the website. And my colleague Monica actually put the link for the first Education Chatter in the chat, so you can find it there and you can register in the website. And again, I won't take any more of your time, so thank you to the presenters, thank you to everyone for participating, and we will see you tomorrow.